The love she most desires, the respect he desperately needs.
Let's get into that.
Hey guys, I'm Andrea Warnock.
I'm Nathan Warnock.
And you're listening to Marriage Monday on the Marriage by Design podcast. So Marriage Monday is a time where we talk about marriage and what God intended marriage to be, how that looks like in our own marriage, and just going back to the Bible and talking about marriage according to the Bible.
It's great. It's great, babe. So it's a new month, so we're starting a new topic this month, and this month we will be talking about love and respect. If you follow us on Instagram, you saw a post that I put up a couple of weeks back kind of previewing this that shows the crazy cycle, which is actually what we're going to be talking about tonight. Love and Respect is a book by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs. It is a phenomenal book based on Ephesians 5:33, which we're going to read here in a minute. But the purpose of our episode of our month-long look at love and respect is really not to teach you this material. He does a phenomenal job with that. I'd encourage you with your spouse, or if you're single, by all means, if you're single, particularly if you have children, to read this book. And if you like the audiobook, do the audiobook. That's great too. There's actually a small group study series going through Love and Respect that our church does at least once, if not multiple times each year. I'm sure there's a church in your area that does the same. So by all means, I'd love you to check that out. Doing this as a small group study is phenomenal.
It really is.
We've done it a few times, get something new every time. He's really funny in the videos. He and his wife, Sarah, are great at sharing the things that they've been through and being transparent. So we're not going to go right directly through this book, but we just want to hit on the principles of this book and be transparent with you guys about how that's impacted us in our marriage, in the hopes that, one, if you've been through this before, maybe you can relate to some of these stories and maybe have a little refresher of what Love and Respect is all about. If you've never been through this, we hope to give you just enough this month to encourage you in your marriage and maybe interest you in taking a look in it further. So that's what we're going to be doing this month. So let's dive in. So we're going to start in the Bible, where we should always be starting. And we are going to start in 1 Corinthians 7. So in 1 Corinthians 7, we're going to take a look in verse 28. So in 1 Corinthians 7, Paul's addressing married couples in Corinth, and he's talking to them about whether they should or shouldn't get married. With all the trouble that were going on in Corinth, and the fact that the church believed they were in the end times, and in fact, from a spiritual standpoint, we're in the end times as we continue to be, right? The kingdom of heaven, as it was referred to by Jesus. But they're asking, well, should we not get married, or should we get divorced, or what should we be doing? And Paul gives them some encouragement about, well, look, if you're married, stay married. If you're single, stay single. That was his feeling. And he specifically says, this isn't a directive from the Lord. This is just some practical advice I have for you. So in verse 28, what he tells them is, but if you do marry, you've not sinned. And if a betrothed woman marries, she has not sinned. Yet those who would marry will have worldly troubles, and I would spare you that. So why do I read that verse? Well, when we get married, we commit to tackling worldly troubles that we would not have to tackle if we weren't married. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a reality, right? If you're married, unfortunately, laugh, laugh, you probably married another human being. And as another human being, that person is flawed, and you're flawed. So the two of you coming together creates a situation where there will be worldly trouble. Mm-hmm. And that's what Paul's addressing. So when we look at the crazy cycle and the difference between men and women in the area of love and respect, what we're really talking about is one of those worldly troubles. And so Paul addresses that in Corinthians. He also addresses marriage in Ephesians, and that's the one we really want to jump into and talk a little bit about what he says in Ephesians, because that is where he sets up this idea of love and respect. So in Ephesians 5, starting in verse 22, he addresses wives and husbands. We're going to take a deep dive look at this passage of Scripture next month, So be on the lookout for that on our Thirsty Thursdays. So I'm not going to read through the whole thing right now for the sake of time, but he's addressing wives, you're in submission to your husbands. Husbands, you lead your wives. And right before that, he had said, we submit to one another as brothers and sisters in Christ. So what he's saying is we all submit to each other as a worship to the Lord. We think of ourselves as lesser than the others. But within the family, there has to be a leader. And God's design for marriage is that the man is the spiritual leader of the home. So he's telling the husbands, in that leadership role, you treat your wife as you would your own body. That's how much you love her. And the crux of it comes in verse 33, which says, however, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. It's really interesting when we look at the words in that verse. The word for love, agape, is unconditional love. It's the love we're asked to have for the Lord. And more importantly, it's the love he has for us. It doesn't matter how good we are. It doesn't matter if we had a good day, a bad day, if we were loving to God, unloving to God. He loves us just the same. And that's what we're called to do with him. It's also what we're called to do with our wives, men. Interestingly, though, when he turns to the wife, he doesn't say, wives, also love your husbands. Mm-hmm. What he says is, wives, respect your husbands. That Greek word for respect there is reverential awe. And it, again, holds that idea of unconditional. Mm-hmm. So your wives are called to respect their husbands, even when, not that this ever happens, but even when your husband doesn't deserve your respect, you're called to respect him unconditionally. That's the principle upon which Dr. Eggerichs wrote the book of Love and Respect. What does it look like? First of all, why? Why did God command husbands to love their wives? Why not tell them to respect their wives? Mm-hmm. And wives, why did he call you to respect us as your husbands and not to love us as your husbands? And then second, when we really unpack that, what does that look like in marriage? But in order to talk about what it looks like when we are loving and respecting each other, we have to talk about what it looks like when we don't. And unfortunately, so many couples find themselves in a place where they step into what he calls in the book the crazy cycle. So babe, do you want to talk to us a little bit about what the crazy cycle is, what it looks like, how it operates, how it gets us off track, and then we're going to turn it to us and kind of share a little bit with you guys about how that looks like in our marriage.
Right. So the crazy cycle, how he explains it, is without love, she reacts. Then she reacts in disrespectful ways. So then without respect, he reacts in unloving ways. Then she feels unloved, so she reacts in disrespectful ways, around and around and around. So that's the cycle that just feeds, it all feeds into each other. Because without love, she's reacting disrespectfully, then he's feeling disrespected, so he reacts unloving.
Yeah.
And around we go.
Yeah, that's great. So just read, because I really like it. Just read around the circle without stopping. Because this is really, you'll recognize this in your marriage when it becomes this.
Without love, she reacts. Without respect, he reacts. So that's the cycle. And it's, for those who are watching.
Yeah, and totally. So that's the graphic that I put up on our Instagram page. So follow us on Instagram and pull that up because, print it and put it up on your fridge because it will be a good reminder of how you're acting and reacting. So go ahead. So how does it happen?
Yeah. Oh, so many ways. So it happens a lot of times very easily and maybe in small ways. And maybe those small ways just build up over time and then something gets you on it. But that can be, really, really anything. For a woman, in any way that you may feel unloved. It may be a lack of attention. It may be a feeling like you're not a priority, the priority that you should be, or words that he's saying that just cut, and so you're feeling like unloved. And maybe that's not how you would identify it. You might just feel like, I'm just mad. but probably what's happening is you're feeling unloved. And so then you react disrespectfully. Maybe that's by using sarcasm. Maybe that's by telling him some ways where he doesn't measure up. And then he's feeling disrespected. Well, he's feeling disrespected, so then what? He's gonna not feel like being very loving. So then he may be spending more time doing other things other than investing in the relationship, or not really caring what you have to say when you're talking.
Yeah.
So, and then around and around and around the cycle goes.
Yeah, and it's really based on the simple principle that women were created with a desire to be loved.
Right.
Men were created with a desire to be respected.
So because women were created with a desire to be loved, we more naturally love.
Correct.
So it's more natural for us to give love. And so we're not commanded in Ephesians 5:32 to love, but because that's natural for us. We're commanded to respect because that's not as natural.
Right.
And then vice versa for the men. Men are created more with a
respect mentality.
Yeah, a respect mentality. So they more naturally give that.
Right.
And women are like, yeah, that's great to have your respect, but I want your love.
Right.
And men have to work on that then.
Right.
Just as women have to really work on the respect piece.
It really goes back to that principle of God's economy, that he's just not really interested in us doing the easy thing.
Right.
Like, he created us in such a way that we have to rely on him in order to do even something like love our wives or respect our husbands well.
Right.
Because it is like speaking a foreign language. And we're going to dig more into that in the next couple of weeks with regards to love and respect and how that plays out in a woman or a man's life. But it really does present a significant challenge in a marriage. Just me figuring out, okay, how do I speak in a way that tells you that I love you and shows you through my actions and my words that I love you. Right? I mean, I can give you a simple example of how we see this a lot in. I'll give an adult example and then I'll give a child example that he gives because I think it's really helpful as we think about this. So the adult example is, have you ever been in a situation, wives, and I'll talk to you specifically, have you ever been in a situation where you're relaying a stressful situation, right? Maybe it's something that's gone wrong at work. Maybe it's something that's gone wrong with the kids, not our kids, but other people have problems with their kids. And maybe you've been relaying that to your husband, and you can see in his eyes that as soon as he realizes there's a problem, he stops listening and the gears start cranking, and he's just waiting for you to be quiet so that he can the solution.
Or maybe not waiting for you to be quiet.
Potentially, not other people's husbands. Not me, but yeah, so he's waiting to jump in with the solution, right? And I'm guessing that you probably didn't feel very great about that situation in the moment. Again, maybe you didn't internally feel like, man, he's being really unloving right now. Maybe it just made you mad or frustrated or, whatever the case may be. But that's a great example where for women, us looking at you and listening and empathizing with what you're going through as best we can, that builds you up, not needing a solution, right? Sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes we need a solution. But for guys, the respectful thing is, you've got a problem. I'm gonna white horse in on this thing, and we're gonna solve it, and then we can move on, and you feel better, and I feel better, and we move on to the next thing. And that feels like, man, that's great, right? When one of my buddies calls me with a problem, he wants a solution, right? That's what we're doing, right? He doesn't call me to say, hey, I got a tree that's dead in my backyard so that I can empathize with what it's like to have a dead tree. He's like, dude, you can come over and we'll grab some pizza and tear this tree down, right? It's about solving a problem. So that's one example where love and respect creates issues in a marriage. For kids, his example is, if you have a son and a daughter, if you ever have put them in a position where they need to apologize to each other for something, or something's gotten confrontational, the daughter, your girls, and again, can be a little bit stereotypical, but it's generally true. Certainly is true for our kids. Mm-hmm. Our daughter wants to look her brother in the eye and see him react as she apologizes, and she starts to tear up as she says, "I'm sorry," and she's looking at him the whole time, and then she moves in for the hug, right? And that's how she restores the relationship and gets resolution. Our son walks over, somewhat begrudgingly, and then will look literally anywhere in the room except her eyes. Mm-hmm. And generally he looks down. Either he's fiddling with his fingers, or he's looking at his toes, or he's, covering his face, or whatever. Why is that? Because for women, even at a young age, the eyes are like that connection piece into the soul. And so as we're sharing something intimate, like an apology, we want to look in each other's eyes, because you want to see and get that security as a woman that he's hearing me and processing this, and he's really sorry. Guys see eye-to-eye contact as a challenge, right? When I look in it, so like my boys, when they get in trouble, I'll say, "Jackson Paul, look at me." And he'll look at me, and I'm looking him in the eye, and he's looking in my eyes, and he knows he better knock it off, because he's walking real close to consequences. See, looking each other in the eyes and a connection point is a challenge. So when we're apologizing for something and trying to show humility, we're not looking at each other in the eyes. Well, you see that immediately creates a conflict, because my daughter's looking at Jackson in the eyes, and he's looking everywhere but her eyes, and she's processing that as, he's not really sorry, he doesn't really want to connect with me. And Jackson's like, why does she keep looking at me? This is making me super uncomfortable. Why won't she just apologize and we can move on? And it creates greater conflict. Those are the types of things that lead to the crazy cycle.
Totally.
So, unfortunately, getting on the crazy cycle oftentimes is a matter of miscommunication.
Yes.
Right? Can be. So once we get on the crazy cycle, what does that look like, and how do we get off the crazy cycle? What does that look like? How could we help folks maybe watching this to identify as the crazy cycle spinning up, right? Before it gets full blown.
Sure. So I think for me, when we're starting to get on that crazy cycle, it looks like being irritated by most things that Nathan's doing unnecessarily. I mean, Nathan's not naturally a very irritating person. So if I'm irritated by kind of everything that he's doing, I'm probably trying to take our train on that crazy cycle, I've got issues that I need to work through. You're laughing.
She's got issues.
So that's kind of how I identify sometimes. Or if I'm feeling angry quite a bit, that's a good identifier. Even if I just feel like we are not jiving, maybe it's not an anger or an irritation, but it's like something's not jiving for more than just a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Then I'm recognizing we're probably either on or
headed towards
in the merge lane onto that crazy cycle, and I need that emergency exit off. I don't know. How do you feel like we're getting on or on the crazy cycle?
I think so often onboarding onto the crazy cycle happens more between your ears than anything else. Like, I think, at least I feel like with us, and I feel like with couples we've talked to, it's like maybe he says something that's disrespectful a week ago, and she's just kind of stewing on that, or she says a cutting remark and he's kind of stewing on it, and by even between the two of them it might seem like things are fine, it's fine, right? But things are sort of building, and the problem is if you don't cut that stuff off at the pass, at some point you allow that to build up inside and build up and build up, and pretty soon it explodes out of your mouth. And it's like that one spark that sets off the dynamite, right? You're sitting around the table at home and she says something innocent and you've been stewing on this and you just cut with something sarcastic, which is unloving. You say a comment about the food, or a comment about the upkeep of the house, or her job, or her parents, right? You hit with one little thing, and that's the opportunity where then she comes back with something disrespectful, and pretty soon it's an evil for evil type relationship.
Yeah, and the crazy cycle isn't just like one conversation.
That's right.
It a lot of times is just a way of living life. Not a good way, but it's kind of just a lifestyle.
Yeah, it really is. If you've ever heard the wives' tale about, the couple got divorced because he doesn't roll the toothpaste, right? Or they got divorced because he puts the toilet paper under instead of the toilet paper over, that type of thing. And of course, we hear that and we think, well, what a ridiculous reason to get divorced. Well, of course, that's not why they got divorced, right? They probably got divorced because they got on the crazy cycle probably years ago and never got off.
Right.
And pretty soon, the tragic thing is, being on the crazy cycle became a way of life for that couple.
And that it's exhausting.
That's right. And pretty soon leads to potential for extramarital affairs or addictions, or just having a marriage where you feel like you're living with a roommate, which is one of the most tragic things in marriage.
Yeah.
So how do we get off the crazy cycle, babe?
So Dr. Eggerichs says the way to get off, it's the most mature person who decides to get off. And it's so true. The person who decides, I'm not going to react in either an unloving or disrespectful manner when I'm feeling unloved or disrespected. So for women, it'd be, when I'm feeling unloved, I'm making the choice to not react disrespectfully. And that is a hard choice, especially when you feel very unloved. But in Ephesians, it doesn't say to only respect your husband when you feel like it or when he deserves it. Right. It's without condition. And so if we're saying, okay, Lord, help me to respect him, even though that's the last thing I want to do right now. He'll give you the strength to do that. That's right. And then maybe it's just that one time that takes you off the crazy cycle. Maybe it's just that one time where he is unloving and expects the disrespect, and you choose to not give that to him, and that gets you off. Maybe it's just once. Maybe it's a habit of continuing to just not feed in to the crazy cycle, and maybe your spouse is wanting to stay on there out of their own hurt, and you time after time choose to give those things over to the Lord and ask him to give you the strength to respond in a loving and respectful way. Yeah, for sure. It's great. So what we wanted to do is just take a few minutes and share transparently. That's one of the pillars of our show, being transparent. Transparently, what are the triggers for us where we see, hey, this is what has generally led us to get on the crazy cycle in the past. Could be specific things, right, that I do, or could be, sort of, whatever it is that you find, hey, this triggers me to get on. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how do we fight that to get off, to avoid the crazy cycle in our marriage, and then we'll close it down. So, what are the triggers you find? My triggers are the same, whether it's Nathan or my kids, as far as this one, and it's not following through on what they said they would do. So I get on the crazy cycle with my kids too. Sure. It's not just with Nathan. Your sons need respect. That's the way they were created, and your daughters need love. That's the way they were created. Yep. So not following through with something they said they would do is a big deal to me. Big deal. So so that can get me on the crazy cycle. And then feeling like, kind of going off that example that you said, feeling like I'm not being listened to. So feeling like I'm talking to you, but either you're somewhere else in your head, or you're just thinking about your own thing. Like, how do I fix this? Or, oh yeah, I have a really good point to say. And just, you know, you can tell when somebody only cares about the things that they're saying because they're always trying to interrupt you. Oh, wait, let me find a breaking point so I can interrupt. You know, that can make me feel really unloved. So those are just a couple things that can be really hard for me to deal with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about you?
Yeah, so for me, I find that I'm in high danger of getting on the crazy cycle when I'm tired, right? Or when we haven't had sex for a while. Like, that's, for me, I found that to be, like, just being transparent, that to be a big trigger for me. Because I think I sort of feel just distant from you. And that brings me actually to a really important thing about love and respect. Do not go down the road of thinking my wife or my husband is just a bad person and they're doing this to me intentionally. Right? He makes a really big point in the book of saying we must arrive at the place that our spouses are good-willed people. Now, how does that play into what I was saying? Because it's really easy for me with sex to get to a place where I'm like, she knows this is important to me, and yet she hasn't pursued that at all since whatever, right? And it's really easy for me to start going down the road of like, she's intentionally trying to make me mad.
Again, there it is. It's in the mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then as I stew on that, my whole demeanor starts to go down. I start to get more irritable. And as I'm more irritable, of course, things that she says that are not meant to be disrespectful at all sound disrespectful because they're on the backdrop of like, oh, you want to watch a show tonight? Well, we could be having sex, but you just want to watch a show. Right? I mean, stupid, right? Of course, you're hearing that thinking, this guy's a crazy person, right? And it is crazy, right? That's why it's called the crazy cycle. So for me, those are just a couple of the, for me, it's about a state of mind, right? If my mind's not right, well balanced between me and the Lord, that's another thing. If I'm not routinely spending time with the Lord, that I'm almost right in the ditch right away. Because if I'm getting together with the Lord, the Holy Spirit's so good to be like, hey, psycho. She's not trying to, intentionally hurt your feelings here. Stop being a weirdo. So that's probably the most important thing for me. So how do we combat that? Right? So we probably just spoiled the big one, right? Like if you're pursuing the Lord and making sure you're spending time with Him, that's your biggest protection against getting on the crazy cycle. But what are some other practical things that we can do to try and stay off that?
Prayer, always a practical thing for any situation. Prayer, lots of prayer.
Right.
And
specifically for what do you pray for in this regard?
Myself, a lot of times. Like that God would change my heart towards my husband, that I would not even have the desire to react disrespectfully, all those sorts of things. So prayer is always big. And then just being honest and talking to your spouse about, I don't like where we're at. How do we get off of this train? Big. And in fact, last year, there was probably a 4-month time frame where we were on the crazy cycle. Maybe even more. No, probably about 4 months. That we were on the crazy cycle. Well, a lot. Maybe every day.
For a while. For several months.
And we had some big issues we were trying to process through, and it was a really tough time. But we had recognized between the two of us that there was a problem. We talked about it frequently, and we weren't willing to accept where we were at. And we sought out some wise counsel, and we sought the Lord together and all that, but we were just really struggling for that 4 months. But it was also, I was also at peace a little bit during that time too, knowing we won't accept this for our marriage. And we're putting in the work to move beyond it, but gosh, it took a long time. And that was hard. So resolving between the two of you that you're not going to stay there and you're going to put the work in until you're not there anymore.
Yeah, I think you named a big one right there too. call it what it is, right? I mean, work hard to be in a place in your marriage where you can sit down with your spouse even when you're upset, but call it as it is, right? Hey, I feel like we're on the crazy cycle right now. I honestly don't know in this moment how to get off, but I want you to know I recognize this and it's not okay. And I'm praying over it. Let's pray over it as a couple. Again, finding someone that can talk to you. You know, one thing we've realized, if you need to have some argumentative discussion between you and your spouse, invite a mentor couple of yours over to your house to just listen in.
If your argumentative discussion can get out of hand.
Right. If it can get, I mean, which in the crazy cycle, a lot of times it can, right? But, you know, if you need to hash through something that's difficult, invite them over to just sit in the room. Because if you struggle with low blows and sarcasm and disrespect, you would be amazed the difference the different path your argument will take, knowing someone you respect is sitting in the room listening. Yeah. It seems like a silly thing, but it works really well.
So much more constructive and usually over with a lot quicker.
Yeah, a lot of times that couple, they won't even say anything. They're just sitting there, right? Supporting you, praying for you, and just listening and jumping in and saying, hey, let's just not. Right, let's not do the sarcasm thing. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
Great. It's great. Any other points on how to jump off that? All right, so that's the crazy cycle. We wanted to share that first because you may be watching this and going, I feel like we're there right now.
Regularly.
If you are, first thing to do is pray. Right? Pray into that situation, even if your spouse doesn't care, doesn't know the Lord, does know the Lord. Any of that, just take this to him first and foremost.
To the
Lord. Yeah. And then think about, how can I get off this crazy cycle, right? What can I do, if you're a husband, what can I do to really love my wife? If you guys aren't talking well right now, write her a note. Right? Just jot her a note, put it under her windshield wiper on her car.
Not about what she needs to do to change.
No, that's good. Yeah, but just saying something you love about her. Right? Hey, I know we're not in a great place. I just want you to know I still love your eyes. Right? I still am glad you're my wife. Right? Just shoot a quick note. And try and step off of that. Right? Also, come back in the next 3 weeks because we're going to dig more into what this love and respect concept looks like. Next week, we're going to talk specifically about love. So you're going to hear a lot of Andrea sharing in that regard. Then we're going to talk about respect. So I'll reciprocate that and talk about respect. Then we're going to talk about what we want to move towards. Rather than the crazy cycle, we want to move towards the energizing cycle, which is really where we're ministering to each other as husband and wife. And I'm getting in a groove, a rhythm of sowing into her lovingly, and she's getting in a rhythm of respecting me. That's where we're going to go this month. Sound good?
That's great.
All right, let's do it. Hey, Tuesday, tomorrow, Testosterone Tuesday, Women Power Wednesday. Thursday, and Family Friday. I'll round out the week, and then we'll close down the week at the end with the diary, as always. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. We will talk to you on the next one.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.